So as you can see, there's quite a bit to this movement. Let's talk a little bit about each of the movements that are contained in this to try to get a little bit more detail, so when you go back and practice it all together, it makes a little more sense. The first movement of this series of movements is called Pung, or what's often translated as ward off. Now, ward off or Pung is also one of the foundational energies or concepts of Taiji. It's something that's supposed to be present in all motions of Taiji. But this movement really emphasizes the feeling of that energy or that mechanical structural aspect of Taiji, and that's why this movement is named after that concept. So when you do this movement, you want to focus on a very full filling in the front arm. Now the front arm typically keeps the elbow a little bit lower than the wrist, and there's just a slight tilt to it. Sometimes it's done a little bit level, and then sometimes, not in this particular movement, but sometimes Pung is done with the arm down lower. Really what you're thinking of here is fullness and warding off an incoming attack. Now the way that this is practiced would not be practical for warding off an incoming attack with the arm here, unless there's a punch coming straight in and you're just kind of like filling that space, but even then you need to bring the hand up higher than it is in this movement. So what you're after in this movement is that filling of warding something off or keeping that fullness in your structure, in your frame, as you deflect an incoming attack, rather than necessarily doing this motion in a way that is that deflection. For example, if a punch is coming in here and I bring my arm up here, that punch is going to be able to continue over that arm, right? So if you were to be using this movement, stopping here doesn't make sense. But stopping here gives you the feeling of that fullness that you're after when you do Pung or when you ward off an attack that's coming in. So remember, often in Taiji forms, the movement that you're doing is teaching you a concept. And that concept can be applied in different ways, not necessarily just the way it's done in the form. So you shouldn't necessarily mirror what you're doing in the form when you're thinking about the applications, but you should take the concept of the movement. So when we do Pung, the concept is fullness and expansion, right? So we're here with that movement, full and expanded. If I was doing this movement and an attack was coming in, I would change where I position that arm, change where I position that arm, change where I position that arm so that it's filling that space and keeping whichever attack is coming in toward me away from me. So it's the fullness that we're after in this movement. As far as the details of doing this movement, when you step out, it's really just rounding up and forward with the arm here, right? That's really all you're doing with that arm, is it's going from down here, up here. And this hand is just your support hand back here. Now the transition of this movement actually shows you a little bit more of the ward off application of this movement before you go into the next movement, which is roll back. And you can think of that as kind of pulling back, but at the same time it's not the same as just pulling, it's leading back. So when you do this Pung movement, you end here, but then you open out a little bit. And this is kind of where that Pung deflection comes in. So if I have something coming at my face and I don't want it to get to my face, I wouldn't just stand here, I would lead it to the side, right? And so that's what happens here before we go back into this roll back movement. So even though the posture that this movement is named after kind of ends here in a way, even though the postures aren't static, they don't really end, think of this as Pung, this was your transition, but that's kind of the expression of the deflection in Pung, and then you have the roll back. So now we want to think of having somebody's wrist and their elbow. So this hand's grabbing the wrist, this one's leading at the elbow. So here, and we're drawing back, extending their elbow so that they can't bend and get away, and you draw back here, leading to the side. As you do that, you're going from this forward stance and shifting back. So we're here, open, that's our deflection, lead back here. Now what you want to be careful of with this, as you lead back, there's also a forward intention that's going on. If everything goes back, it's easy to be overpowered. You send too much of your energy back, you send too much of your structure back. So even though the motion is drawing in and moving back, there's still a forward intention that balances that so that you have forward and back balanced. And if that force starts coming towards you, you can still off balance it with that forward intention. So it's not fully pulling back, but the motion is leading back from up here, leading back to this side. Be really careful with this one as you come back. It's really common to let this knee buckle in all kinds of different ways. Keep it lined up with that toe. Make sure that you're moving from the hip joints and not twisting the knees as you come back. And make sure you maintain good structure as you do this. You don't want to lean back here. You don't want to lean forward here. Don't do a bunch of leaning. Keep good alignment. And if there's a little bit of a forward tilt, that's fine, but keep the spine aligned. And as you come back, rotate with your spine as your axis coming here, right? You don't want to swing around. Just turn the spine and shift back. If you've been watching the silk grilling lectures, this right leg is turning out and away. This left leg is turning in and toward. So they're stationary, so what I'm doing is moving my body as if they're doing that motion. And I'm twisting through the spine as my axis of rotation. So from here, open, shift back, here. So that's the first two movements. You have Pung, which is that ward off energy. You have roll back, which is that leading energy. So if a force is coming towards you, instead of just absorbing it, you're leading it so that it misses you, misses your center, and goes somewhere else. The next one is G, or squeeze. And sometimes this is thought of as a squeezing motion here because it can be used in squeezing, like holding someone and bringing them into a strike that you're doing. So there's that squeezing concept. Other concept of this is filling space. So each of these movements feeds into the next. And if someone is doing a Pung motion on you as an offensive movement, so they're using that energy to attack, you can use Lu, that roll back movement, to counter it. Well, if you're doing roll back or Lu, they can use G to counter that. And this is something that we would get into more in a push hand situation, and I would describe more in a push hands video, but I'm going to give you a little insight into that here. The idea is, as you're being lued, as you're being drawn into this, it's changing the direction of your force. So we're going to pretend here I'm the one who started Pung, you're the person who's doing a roll back. So I did Pung towards you like this, and you said I don't really care for that, so you're leading it to the side. Well, if I come out here and you start leading it to the side, all of a sudden the force that was coming towards you here is going over there, and that changes everything about my structure, right? And it's not accomplishing what I was wanting to accomplish because I was trying to get to you. So now what I can do is let that energy go this way, and I'm going to change what's happening here, and I'm going to keep my shift or my energy going towards you here. So what I had started coming towards you here was led to the side. That can go to the side, but I'm going to keep coming towards you and then fill that space towards you again. Typically when you're doing push hands, this would be done with a step, so I can fill in here. But in this situation, we'll just say that the energy is going this way, and instead of fighting it, trying to pull it back, I'm just going to shift in here and fill this space. Well, to support this arm in that motion as I bring it back to my original direction, I'm going to use this hand, and sometimes that can be done at the elbow, it can be done on the forearm, or it can be done at the wrist. In the forearm, we do it at the wrist. Here, and you fill that space there. So that's that G, that squeeze. You're basically squeezing into the space that you originally were being pulled away from. So you can carry that concept into practicing this move in the form. After you come here, now you're going back and you're squeezing in. Squeeze in with the shoulder, squeeze in with the arm, and fill the space going back in this direction. So that feeling, it's not just pushing out with the arms. It's after you come back. If I was to do this more like I was doing it with a partner, it would be here, and then I would come here and squeeze that space here. So it's this kind of a motion, but that's an exaggeration, and typically you wouldn't do so much motion with the spine. You just rotate into it there. Then our last movement, on, which is pushing with both hands, basically is the counter to that squeezing motion. So I do Pung towards you, you roll back, I change that, I do G. Now as I'm squeezing in with this, what you do is you change that and push to get me off you again. So it's kind of this exchange between Pung, Lu, Ji, and An that's actually turned into a push hands pattern, and someday I hope to make a video that gets into that. But those four movements are really foundational in Taiji because of the energies that they express, and they kind of help demonstrate how all of those energies should be present in those specific movements, but then also in all of Taiji movements. So this is a long movement, and there's a lot of really important foundational concepts stuck in these four movements that are put together as one movement and then down on both sides. So this is a lot to learn all at once, but it's really worth taking the time to feel that fullness on this movement. Maintain your structure and draw back as if something is pushing towards you and you're not letting it get to you, you're just leading it to the side. And then if you're being drawn off to the side, you're filling that space and maintaining your center. And if something's filling your space, you're able to draw it down and back and get it out of your space. So even if you're not interested in the martial side of Tai Chi and you're just doing it for health, these concepts you can use in your approach to life as well, where you maintain your space, you lead things away that would upset your space, you can regain your space through a change in your structure and being a little bit more fluid in how you think and move. And then if something is filling your space that shouldn't be there, you can redirect that away. The things to look out for as you're doing this movement is when you shift forward, make sure the knee doesn't go past the toe. Keep your knees and your toes aligned, as with any movement. When you shift back, it's very important to be careful about what you're doing with this back leg. Don't shift the weight to the front of the foot so that you strain the knee. Keep it shifted right in front of the heel and allow that pushing down to support the leg and protect the knee. Keep the knee aligned, move from the hips. All those things apply here as you shift forward and back. That's very important. And then as you do each movement, when you do Pung, come out about shoulder height. This is kind of your standard position for this. When you do Lu, you're drawing back, again, about chest level for this one. When you do Ji, that's staying at chest level. And then as you do this, be careful that you don't open the arms too wide. You're just opening them about shoulder height, about shoulder width, and they come back at that height and that width. Sink down and then push forward as you shift forward, again, about that height and that width. Not super wide, not right next to each other.